Hi everyone and welcome. Today is a very exciting day here at Verify First because we are joined by Krystal Alegbeleye, the Vice President and Director of Global Learning and Development at Golin, to discuss recruit, reskill, and retain today's workforce. This past year, we've spent our time having important conversations with some of America's most notable leaders in the HR and TA space. Through our HR at the Table Thought Leadership webinars, we've discussed the role HR and TA has in DE&I, brand, technology, talent, culture, leadership, and so much more. Our goal is to bring relevant and timely topics to our HR and TA community that supports you in your roles. All of these topics can be accessed through our HR at the Table resources page on our website at verifiedfirst.com. With each webinar you watch, you can earn 1 SHRM and 1 HRCI credit. You also have the option to receive credit for attending today's webinar too. If these discussions are important to you, be sure to check out our HR at the Table calendar to keep up to date on topics we're talking about. We've also worked hard to bring you a comprehensive deep dive of all of the topics we've discussed through this series. So, if you'd like to gather more insight, be sure to check out our blog page, also at verifiedfirst.com. Now, before we dive into today's discussion, I'd like to discuss some housekeeping items. As I mentioned, this webinar is available for 1 SHRM and 1 HRCI credit. For our live attendees looking to receive credit, be sure to stick around for our post-webinar survey. If you're listening to this on demand, check your email for instructions on how to redeem your credit. Don't worry, this webinar is being recorded, so you can use it as a resource, pass it along to your coworkers, or watch it whenever you want. We'd love for you to utilize the chat function during this event to send in any questions that you have for our speakers. To prepare, let's practice now. In the chat feature, let us know where you're tuning in from and if this is your first time attending HR at the Table. Hello, first timer from Pasco, Washington. It's good to have you. Eleanor from Boston, welcome. Dayton, Ohio, hello. Another Ohio, Columbus. Nashville, hello everyone. Los Angeles, Arizona, wow. All right, well, with that in mind, I'd like to start by thanking GoCo for sponsoring this episode of HR at the Table and by officially welcoming everyone to today's discussion. Please send a friendly hello and a warm welcome in the chat to our HR at the Table host, Liv Carter, and Krystal Alegbeleye, the Vice President and Director of Global Learning and Development at Golin. Without further ado, take it away, Liv.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of HR at the Table. I am Liv Carter. I am your host for today's HR at the Table interview, and I am quite excited to have the opportunity to sit down with Krystal Alegbeleye for a discussion on recruiting, reskilling, and retaining today's workforce. We'll be discussing some of the challenges in today's talent market, including the significant role of reskilling and what that has to do with your talent strategy. Krystal, so great to have you here. How are you doing?
I am doing great. I am happy to be here. Based in LA, but just hanging out in Phoenix for a bit, so getting some heat.
Just a little bit, I'm sure. Krystal, it's so great to have you here, and I'm so excited to kick off our conversation around recruiting, reskilling, and retaining. But before we get started, I'd love for you to share a bit about what you do at Golin Group, and along with what you're passionate about.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today. As I was introduced, I'm Krystal Alegbeleye, the Head of Learning and Development globally for Golin Group. In my role, I support and provide talent development offerings to our employee base globally. So those experiences look like traditional and more conventional opportunities such as workshops and crash courses, as well as a bit more of developmental support with one-to-one coaching and some talent development and management programs. And I'm truly passionate about helping our talent population maximize their skills, their abilities, their gifts. I truly believe innately people know within what they want to develop and what they want to work on, and their skills and their strengths to help them. And I help them bring that up to the surface. They have it all within them already. I just do about 10% of work to the 90% that they already have.
Yeah. Well, again, we're so glad to have you here, and I think you're the perfect speaker for today's topic. So why don't we get started? Great. So, Krystal, we've been discussing today's talent-focused market for a while now, but as a professional that works with talent programs, I'd love to hear your thoughts on where you think we're at today in the talent market and what you think candidates are looking for today.
Right. I'd say that while motivations and interests are largely personal to the individual, there are a couple of things that candidates are looking for similarly across the board in today's markets. Candidates want to know what it's like to work for your company and whether your company's mission aligns to their personal values. I've certainly seen more of that within the past couple of years, and I think that trend will continue to increase. There are also factors like the company culture, workplace flexibility, the company's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion and well-being, and even in the candidate experience, positive interactions or not, with recruiters and employees as part of that hiring process. Those are all key factors in that candidate's decision to ultimately accept the offer and join your organization.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned candidates wanting to know what it's like working for your company. And actually, in our last HR at the table, we talked about how candidates are doing their research today. Are you experiencing that as well? And any additional thoughts on that?
100%. My position in interviewing and recruitment is that the candidates are interviewing us as an organization as much as we are interviewing them. And so they're doing a lot of research. And oftentimes the first interaction a candidate has with your organization is through your company's website. So they're going to your website, they are taking a look through your company's history, what's special about your organization, how you talk about yourself. Frankly, they're also going to sites to get more of that employee perspective, both former and current. So they're going to sites such as Glassdoor and Indeed and are getting that anonymous feedback. And they're coming prepared with questions. So I think it's all relevant for the time that we're in. And again, one of those trends that I think we'll only continue to see to rise.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned website, and I know we talked a little bit about this, but employer branding, right? Taking the website, going beyond that, and company employer branding. How are you seeing brand play a role in, recruiting and engaging today's talent?
Yeah, I would say that employer branding piece is so important. Every company has a reputation, whether it be for a product or a service, but also, and that reputation is their brand. But there's also this employer brand, and that's more about how your organization is viewed as an employer. And I would say that's very important, not only for former employees, but current employees, and also future employees, right? Those candidates that we're looking to bring into the organization. So candidates, as we touched on a moment ago, want to know as much as they can up front about the company before they even apply. So they're going to the website and they're seeing those images, the narratives that the companies are presenting of themselves. And I think it's important from an employer branding standpoint to touch on, what's special about your organization. How does your company not only live, but achieve its values? Those are all unique things and pieces about the organization that you can market. Essentially, employer branding is a marketing tool that will intrigue candidates and can draw them in to apply.
Right. Yeah. And I think so. Just going back to today's talent market being an educated workforce when it comes to they know about your organization, they know about your leadership and your values. I know we talked a little bit offline about what you do when it comes to recruiting with purpose and leveraging the employer brand. I think it'd be really helpful for our audience to kind of hear what you've developed and some of the maybe lessons learned along the way.
Sure. Within Golin, we've done some work around our employer brand and how we talk about ourselves in the marketplace. We are utilizing more than ever social platforms as well. So if you go to LinkedIn, you'll notice that we are a public relations firm, so we do post quite a bit of content throughout the day, but a lot of that content is employee based, and we have our talent population providing perspective, providing insights, whether it be in a blog or an article. So they're not only talking about their expertise and the projects that they're working on, but they're also talking about essentially their Golin experience and how what they're doing here within our agency is exciting and motivating for them. And with Live, I talked about offline recruiting with purpose, and it's a training program that I've put together for anyone that's involved in the hiring process to really start to think through how we talk about ourselves as an organization, how we interview with intention and remove bias from that process, and ultimately how we select for the best candidate for the opportunity. And I think too, I'll take a moment to touch on here that from a recruiting standpoint, one of the most important parts of the recruitment process, and one that often has red flags, is that job description. Yeah, and so the employees are going to your organization's website, but then they're also taking a look at the careers link perhaps and the roles that you've posted. And this job description is a document, and when created appropriately, it can be a compelling document that gets candidates excited for and wanting to apply for your opportunity. But I've certainly seen sometimes that job descriptions can be problematic because of the way they're written. They can be written in a way that almost disqualify your candidate before they can even apply. There's so much that goes into being mindful around how you create that document. Obviously happy to chat with anyone offline about that, but it can be a really, really useful tool when done effectively to widen that candidate pool and ultimately get you more candidates to look at for your opportunity.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And for our audience that they're probably about to ask this, we do have Krystal's LinkedIn at the end of the webinar available, so you can connect with her and ask her some additional questions. Krystal, we do have a question from Mike here, and this is an interesting one. I'm curious your thoughts. Have future job candidates lost, that professional etiquette a bit in the hiring process? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Ooh, that is a really good question, and I feel like there's so many ways I could go with responding to this, but I'd give my perspective, and I'd be happy to see in the chat how other people would respond to this. I would say in terms of professional etiquette, I haven't seen a loss necessarily of that in the recruitment process. what I have seen is more so an eagerness to want to know where they are in the process. And, you know, when we talk about recruiting with purpose, one of those, one of the pieces of guidance that I give is around communication and really being mindful about communicating with that particular candidate about where they are in the experience. Now, we know that with hiring managers, you know, and how they go back and forth on a decision process, sometimes it can extend the time frame of closing the search. But candidates essentially are just looking to know where they stand. So, and one of my things that I practice internally is recruiting or not, getting to them before they get to me. So if a week has gone by and the candidate hasn't heard from me, I can bet that, you know, at the top of next week, they're going to reach out to me. So even if I don't have an update for them, I just would shoot them a note. Hey, you know, I know it's been a couple of days. You haven't heard from me yet. I just want to let you know that you're still in consideration, or whatever the process, wherever they are in the status. Just giving them that communication piece will more often than not put them at ease. And whether or not you have to communicate positive or not so positive news with them about their candidacy, they will come out of that experience feeling respected, and that their time was valued.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you mentioned it comes across respectful and that they were valued, providing that transparent communication. Yeah, that's huge. We do have another question. The chat is questions are being submitted, which is awesome. Angela is wondering, do you often advise candidates to communicate if they aren't responding to offers, or about having offers from other companies?
When I've recruited, as I am starting that relationship with the candidate, I think that transparent communication is key. So I think one of the things that I've been intentional about inviting them to share with me is if they have things like certain offers on the table. From a timing perspective, that can trigger the decision-making process. And so if I know that information, I am then able to go back to my hiring manager and say, for instance, if this particular candidate isn't on the short list or maybe in the top 2, like, hey, this candidate has some other offers that they're considering. You know, is it a possibility that they are like in that top 2? And if so, you know, let's talk a bit more around the selection process and try to, and I then try to influence a deadline so that I can get back to that candidate, and let them know, you know, where they stand. But I do try to encourage candidates to share with me if they are entertaining other offers.
Right. Yeah. I loved that you used the word invitation. You're inviting them to kind of present that information and building on that relationship. You know, and in previous HR at the tables, we've talked about even if the candidate's not the right fit, you know, today or for that role, like they're still in your pipeline of candidates and potentially advocates for your company and your hiring process further down the line. So that is huge. So I do want to kind of transition a bit and talk about, you know, talent market today obviously isn't set in stone, but it is it has changed drastically over the last couple of years. And I'm just curious how you see the talent market evolving when it comes to skills and candidate and company needs.
And I would say more broadly, I think just from a generational standpoint, we are certainly seeing more of Gen Z entering in the workforce. Pretty soon, millennials will become the dominant generation in the workforce. So I think in terms of in terms of skills, there is this inclination and shifting to a more skills-based approach, and one that encompasses, certainly in what I've seen in the past 2 years, more of a focus on digital skills. Not to say that there aren't skills, such as marketing, leadership, communication. All of those skills certainly are fundamental, and I think still will remain in demand. But certainly those digital skills, platforms, technology, more of a need for organizations around competencies in those in that set of skills.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Are you seeing, that digital skill set kind of versatile across the talent landscape as a whole?
I would say, I wouldn't say as a whole. I think it depends on the type of opportunity. But what I'm seeing and function, but what I'm seeing certainly is more types of competencies around digital tools and platforms. For instance, a strategist and who not only has that experience in primary and secondary research, but is able to use tools that they can mine to help them come to insights. And there's a breadth of tools that a strategist can use in their practice that didn't necessarily, or was not necessarily part of their process 5 or even 10 years ago, but certainly more of a heavier need and influence to have some awareness or competency in that type of skill, or in that type of digital skill or tech rather.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. So Krystal, before we kind of move to discussing reskilling and what that means for recruiting, we do have a question here from Nora that says, what is your opinion on, the best way to recruit newly or recent graduates in their career and empower their skill sets? Any thoughts on that?
I love this question, Nora. I would say personally, I love it as just an advocate for early careers folks, because there's nothing that can be more demoralizing than someone who's trying to get their foot in the door and they're applying to these jobs and they're seeing that they need to have this capability and that competency. And I'm like, they don't have it yet. They haven't had the benefit of learning it yet. So, or being trained on it yet. And so, my encouragement would be to hire for aptitude and train on skill to the extent that your organization can support that. So I think it's, and this particularly for early careers folks, whether it be in an internship program, if they had the privilege of being part of that, or perhaps maybe even in their coursework. If there are some similar tools or platforms that they have experience in, certainly those skills can be transferable. I think what's most important is that they're demonstrating that they're eager and willing to learn, and them owning that while also getting support, I think can be that the best way, not only for recruiters, but managers as well, to encourage those applicants, not only those applicants to apply, but then once they're brought into the fold, really taking the time to help develop and upskill them.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question, Nora. And Kim actually in the chat added, hire for will over skill.
Yes.
Love that. That's great. So let's go ahead and pivot a little bit and talk about reskilling and what that means for recruiting. Gartner found that 33% of skills that were listed in a typical job posting in 2017 were no longer necessary or relevant for professionals in 2021. And now that same study has shown that there's actually 10% more skills that are needed today than in previous years. So I'd like to just kind of start, high level what does reskilling look like today? And does it look different given that we're in a talent shortage?
Yeah, I would say that when it comes to reskilling, I mean, certainly the rate and scale of changes to the world of work has caused rapid changes to what are considered essential skills now more than ever. And so when we talk about reskilling and helping employees to develop a new skill set or new skills, I think there has been certainly a sense of urgency around that. You know, and you know, we can talk about what that looks like from a recruitment perspective, or you know, internally when you know organizations are choosing not to hire. But I think that you know, certainly there is that appetite, and I would say not only are organizations craving it, but employees are craving it as well. You know, they're feeling that they want to stay, that they want their skills to stay relevant in this ever-changing landscape.
Right. Yeah. Did you see, you know, talking about COVID and just the changes that COVID brought, did you see reskilling become a higher priority or even a necessity?
Absolutely. You know, with Golin, we went to, as I'm sure many organizations did, working 100% remote seemingly overnight. And so all of a sudden, there was this need to really lean into digital tools for collaboration and performing day-to-day tasks, and a need to reskill people, so certain populations of people, so that they were able to use those tools to do their work. And so I think that you know COVID has accelerated that rate. You know, I would say, you know, digital skills aside, I'm also thinking when we talk about reskilling, you know, how do you reskill for things like resilience and being resilient around flexibility, and adopting, and I think it's all about adopting that continuous growth mindset. You know, change has been a constant, but certainly that change has been accelerated. So how do you bounce back after a very difficult period? How do you communicate flexibility in a way that allows people to get their work done within a set time frame, but trusting that people will do that. You know, those are all skills, both you know hard skills and soft skills that you know many organizations have been challenged with.
Yeah, yeah. I would be so curious, like if we, you know, had the time for it to talk about reskilling and it in, you know, it aligned with company culture and those two working together, especially bouncing back after COVID, and navigating those changes. That's a really interesting connection there. So Krystal, I'm curious, in your opinion, why would an organization choose to reskill instead of hire? What are some of the benefits that you've seen or that you communicate to your leadership to make it a priority?
Yeah, I would say, you know, in terms of why an organization, why Golin would choose to reskill instead of hire, is you know, frankly, retention, right? You know, developing and promoting talent from within. It's not only rewarding for the employee, but it's a great retention opportunity for the agency, a great story to share, and really demonstrates a commitment to career pathing, and that yes, there are steps to advancement here. So I'm a proponent of developing and promoting from within, obviously. But I think that is the greatest benefit that an organization can offer its people and itself, instead of just going out to market to hire.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Now, is there, let me figure out how I want to word this, but how does an organization know when to reskill versus to hire externally? Are there kind of factors or situations that maybe it does just for the organization make more sense to reskill versus hire externally?
Yeah, I think it depends on on a couple of factors. But I think fundamentally with the role itself and with the job, has jobs evolved and as they require new skills? Is there a function or a capability that the organization is looking to bring in? Perhaps maybe where there isn't anyone in the organization or there aren't any business units within the organization who either possess current skills or transferable skills to align with that role. I think that would be an opportunity to kind of look externally. But also, I think the opportunity in that is that you have someone coming in with that knowledge and that skill set that can then train up others, that can create and build something, and that can help the company grow and innovate, and potentially putting that skill at the center of their strategy.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I feel like that goes back to the incorporating reskilling and learning and development in your culture and really encouraging that. So Eleanor has a question. She asks, do you sometimes choose to hire externally instead of reskill if perhaps you're looking for diversity? Any thoughts on that, Krystal?
That's a great question, Eleanor. And I think certainly the diversity has become a large part of the recruitment conversation. While I encourage hiring for diversity, I also just want to be very mindful, and this is something that I'll counsel the hiring managers on as well. Think about why you are bringing that particular talent into your organization. Yes, they are diverse, but also can they do the job? Do they have transferable skills or current skills that match the role? Are you willing as a hiring manager to spend the time with them to develop them and to train them? I think what we often encounter with, and I say we, speaking more generally from what I've seen in the marketplace, is that there is this excitement to hire in and bring in diverse talent. But then they're kind of left in the lurch. They're not really given the attention and the developmental opportunities so that they can thrive. So I think if the hiring manager is very committed to doing that, I do think it could work.
Yeah, that's a great note on bringing in that belonging and retention part of it as well, investing in them. That's a great question, Eleanor. Thank you for submitting that. So I want to talk a little bit more about reskilling and recruiting and whose job it is. So who, in your opinion, whose job is it to seek out reskilling opportunities for employees? Should it be hiring managers? Should it be, leadership? Should it be on the employee to, ask for opportunities? What are some of your thoughts there, Krystal?
I'll share my thoughts, but I would love to see thoughts in the chat too. I think we're talking about reskilling, which is learning new skills and equipping our employees to switch lanes and ideally move into new roles within the organization. And so, while HR, while I as an L&D professional can weigh in on reskilling opportunities and can shape them and create content and an experience, particularly when it comes to leadership development too. I do think that much of the reskilling opportunities are the responsibility not only of the employee, but of their manager. I say that because regardless of where one is in their career journey, an essential component of managing your career is being able to seek out those opportunities for continuous learning and to build that into your career life cycle. That said, managers should also be advocates for supporting and reskilling their employees. They often have, they're often in the know about opportunities in the pipeline, things coming up from a business perspective, and additionally, managers have such a huge influence on the employee experience, right? We've all heard that people don't leave companies, they leave managers. So, really managers identifying those opportunities, first of all, knowing what their employee is looking to grow in, or, the manager kind of coaching or offering advice for what the employee can continue to grow in, and then aligning developmental opportunities to help support that can really be valuable. So to the extent that the manager is identifying those opportunities, and again, they can be single tasks, they could be stretch assignments, they can be maybe a little special project or a more formal opportunity, whatever it is. All of that can be pretty transformative for an employee's development.
Yeah. And I'm looking at the chat, and it looks like there's some individuals that agree with your comments there. Amanda said, I think as a leader, it's important to notice the building of skills in employees, and then perhaps offer those opportunities as well, along the line to employees. So Amanda, thank you for your thoughts there. Krystal, just to kind of build off of Amanda's comment on providing those opportunities, have you found, any tricks or tips on communicating opportunities to employees?
Tips or tricks? I would say what I like to coach people managers on is embedding these conversations into part of their one-on-ones that ideally they should be having regularly with their direct reports. And that starts from day one, building that relationship with your employee. One thing that we do at Golin is that we have continuous performance management conversations, and this may be a practice in your organization, but here within Golin, we encourage our managers and our employees to have those conversations quarterly. There are formal points on the calendar where they're having that formally, but again, I'm always pushing them to have that those conversations more frequently around development, around reskilling opportunities. And and I think part of the frequent nature of having these conversations is that sometimes, hey, we're all human, right? Managers forget, they have so many things going on, but if they can have designated points on the calendar and as part of their one-on-ones where they're having those conversations, something will stick in there, and there will be an opportunity or an assignment that comes up where that manager can delegate something to their employee and provide them the opportunity to work on it and provide encouragement and feedback and support so that the employee feels like they're not only reskilling, but they're doing a great job and they want to be motivated to continue.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So we have a question from Andrea that says, when you have a talent gap and resource shortage, how do you guide managers to carve out time for reskilling when they are short on it? You had mentioned get something on the calendar, try to make it regular one-on-ones. Anything else to add to Andrea's question?
I think fundamentally just really, I don't want to say push, maybe that's too harsh of a word, but strongly urging managers to make it a priority. And I want to say too that when it comes to reskilling or whatever opportunity it is, it doesn't have to be a robust experience. If it's 30 minutes out of, or an hour out of the person's week, they are still spending time learning, but it's not, it's time well spent, because ultimately it will help them be able to do the job, but also not, hopefully not disrupt, you know, the flow of work with a tight or, you know, a tight work staff, or, you know, a space where people are feeling that they do have they don't have bodies necessarily, so they have to take on more than they normally would. But I think it's just shifting the conversation around what is considered a reskilling or a learning opportunity, and then managers really encouraging the employee to take that time out of their workday, you know, not late in the evening or on the weekend, but try to build it into the workday.
Yeah, really value them as a person during the workday. Yes, yeah. I love that, and I want to talk more about what reskilling looks like for employees, like investing in them. But before we transition, so we do have a question from Shelly, and I think we're gonna roll into a quick poll question. But Shelly was wondering if there are platforms or softwares to help with reskilling, or any suggestions to start reskilling. I think that's a great question, Shelly. I'm going to launch this poll question real quick as part of our research that we put together at the end of every year on our TA Tech Buyer's Guide, to kind of help us share what is going on in the market when it comes to technology. Now, Krystal, I am curious, you know, obviously here we mentioned ATS, CRM, background screening, assessment, no replacements. Are there other technology solutions that you have seen support reskilling specifically?
Yes, I would say learning management systems or learning experience systems. There are some systems out there that do come with content already embedded in the platform. So whether you are an HR person wearing, or a recruiter having some kind of responsibility with L&D, you're not the one having to come up with all of the learnings. You know, off the top of my head, LinkedIn Learning is a great platform. There are e-learnings on that platform, and I know there's a lot of talk around e-learnings and their value, but I personally love LinkedIn Learning. I'm an advocate of it. There are thousands of courses in the business, technology, and creative space that can be valuable for employee and career professionals at all levels.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I see in the chat we're seeing a lot of LMS solutions, LinkedIn. So any of you in the audience that maybe clicked no replacements, maybe if you have a solution, you can drop it in the chat for others to take a look at, or look into an LMS for reskilling. So Krystal, I want to be mindful of our time and talk about reskilling as a form of investing in employees and retaining employees. So, you know, just high level, what does reskilling have to do with the employee experience? What have you seen from your experience?
Yeah, reskilling has a lot to do with the employee experience. Employee experience, that equates to everything a worker learns, everything a worker does, sees, and feels at each stage in their life cycle with your organization. And I would say that reskilling is an ongoing stage, or ideally should be an ongoing stage in the employee's journey, with people developing at different rates across a variety of skills. So what I've seen and have helped advocate for as employees continue to develop in their roles, is helping to quantify their productivity and their ability to be a team player and promote their promotion aspirations. And so essentially, you know, reskilling and the employee experience, we want to be offering our people the chance to expand their skill sets. You know, and we've talked about the benefits of reskilling, but, you know, I think one of the things that, yes, an employee experience, but also an organizational level, is when you are reskilling your people, you're creating a more well-rounded, cross-trained workforce, and you're really increasing that team effectiveness and productivity. And we all know what happens when that happens. Business results increase.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So where would you recommend in organizations, like where do they start with reskilling? You know, is there obviously there's a lot of resources you can put into it, but is there kind of maybe a 1, 2, 3 step, or somewhere like a baseline for our audience that maybe they could start with to start investing in their employees in that way?
Yeah. Let me keep it brief. I'd say, you know, and I tend to say this sometimes with trainings where people come and say that they need a solution, but they're not really sure what they want the employee to adapt, change, grow, or develop in. And I think the best way to answer that question is to define your business goals. You know, thinking about, and I think that does actually help set the baseline and the foundation for your employees' development, because it then allows you as an organization, or you as the manager, to be thinking about how you're investing in your employees' development. I think once you've defined those business goals, you can then take a look at your employee, or then take a look at your team, and start to assess the gaps, the skills gaps, understanding what is, you know, that roadblock, or, you know, what is that gap either in knowledge or skills that's causing a roadblock in them being able to meet objectives. And then 3, I feel like this may be a bunch of things, but if I were to consolidate, I would say not only setting goals for their development, but really being clear in your communication around the expectations. And I do think all of those 3 things, so defining your business goals, assessing those skill gaps, and setting goals for commitment and communicating, setting goals for the development and communicating expectations, will help you start to identify what the right training, what the right reskilling opportunity looks like, and will allow you to tweak and to adjust as things come up, right? There is not a perfect solve. You're learning with your employee as part of this process. So I think you should be open to that journey and seeing where it takes you.
Right. Yeah. Somehow you were able to get it into a 1, 2, 3. Now, no, it's not that simple. So I appreciate you giving that insight to our audience. So Krystal, how can you know, our audience, for example, utilize reskilling no matter the budget, right? So I think we have in our audience today a wide range of organizations and size, HR and TA department, team size. What are some thoughts on how you can always leverage it or keep it top of mind?
Yeah, I think we know, right, when budget comes up, unfortunately, and I think the reality is yes, things like L&D do end up like on that list of things to scale back on. So I think some creative ways to reskill, and this is something that we're doing within Golin, is allowing our people or in this case, your people, the opportunity to share a particular topic, tool, resource, whatever it is that they're truly passionate about, giving a presentation end to end. Again, it doesn't have to be a whole formal thing, but 30 minutes, maybe 45, on what that thing is, how to do that thing, how that thing can help support work. And it's a great way for, when we talk from a learning perspective, we say that, when you are proficient in that thing, when you can communicate it to someone in layman's terms. So for the person that's presenting it, it's not only a great opportunity for them to really cement their learning, it establishes them as a subject matter expert. They get to share something that they're really passionate about. And, they are providing their peers with, insight into a great resource. So I think a creative way around the budget conversation are identifying people around the organization who can speak to particular trends, tools, functions. And I think also to think about career pathing and how and what are some creative ways that you can provide reskilling without having to go out and get that training or that coach or pay for whatever it is. I think that just the opportunity for social learning, an employee being able to observe a particular meeting or a conversation, or some kind of, I would say like a how-to, to see that in action and observe it, I think can be a great way as well for that person to get some reskilling. In a social aspect, they're observing someone doing it. And then maybe they can take a hand at doing it themselves and get some feedback around some things that they can tweak in their how-tos to refine and enhance and make it a bit better. So I think those are some creative ways around the budget conversation, but if any of you are trying anything differently that you would like to share, I invite you to drop it into the chat.
Yeah, that's super insightful. And my team's on the line, and I'm, mentally taking some notes here as we discuss. Michael mentioned in the chat, he said toolbox talks. Love that. That's great. Thank you, Michael, for kind of adding that name to it. Krystal, I want to talk about, we kind of talked about communicating reskilling to candidates and employees, but I want to get your thoughts on, like, how do we use reskilling to draw candidates into open job positions? Should it, be considered an employee benefit, or, what is that? What are your thoughts on leveraging reskilling in that sense?
Yeah, I think in leveraging reskilling as a way to draw candidates in, I think we're in a very interesting time where we are, and an interesting time, I hope, is that this will continue, that we, really shift our focus from thinking about who can apply to certain opportunities. Traditionally what I've seen is, the degree or some kind of a X years of experience or applicable experience to a role or an opportunity. And that's going to get you a very finite group of people that are eligible for that opportunity. So I would say in terms of reskilling as a way to draw candidates in, rethink those traditional barriers to entry. And perhaps if the job doesn't necessarily call for it, can you open up the qualifications so that to be more inclusive, so that someone doesn't necessarily need to have a degree, but maybe they have a skill, certain skills that would qualify them for that role. And that can also help increase the size of your talent pool, and ideally pinpointing those quality candidates for those hard to fill roles that will take forever because we are focused on the degree or the X amount of years of experience. I know you had a question around the benefit piece, and could reskilling opportunities be included as an employee benefit? I would say sure. I think that employees want to feel invested in. We're certainly seeing more of that with the newer generations in the workforce. And companies can do this in a number of ways around reskilling. A common opportunity that I've seen in organizations, and maybe this is one that we want to disrupt in a helpful way, is around educational assistance. Traditionally I've seen this for a certificate program or a degree program, but can we offer some kind of educational assistance that is either tied to a course or some kind of experiential learning and reskilling opportunity that the employee wants to be exposed to? Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So all the way from bringing the candidate in the door to retaining them through the opportunities. I love the experience idea. That's really interesting. So Krystal, I know we're approaching time, and I want to make sure our audience can get their Sherman HRCI credits after this. But I just wanted to say, any last advice or lasting remarks for our audience today?
I'm just happy to be here and I thank everyone for sharing their questions and the engagement in the chat. I would say as HR and TA professionals, we are on the front lines of this ever-changing future of work. And we're shaping it as we're moving along. And so I think you all should be very proud of the work that you are doing and continuing to do to create a more dynamic, inclusive workforce.
Yeah, that's great. Krystal, it was so great having you here. Our audience, Krystal's LinkedIn is on the slide, so you can connect with her. She was so graciously willing to do so. So go ahead and ask her additional questions. This was great, Krystal, and super insightful, and we really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Liv, for having me. And thank you all so much for tuning in. I appreciate your time.
Yeah. So audience, if you're looking for Sherman HRCI credit, I'm going to pass it off to our voice in the wind, or Amanda, as we call her here at Verified First. Take it away, Amanda.
Well, that about wraps it up for today's discussion. I want to thank everyone for your attendance today. Our guest, Krystal Alegbeleye, the Vice President and Director of Global Learning and Development at Golin, our host Liv, and especially our sponsor GoCo for making this episode of HR at the Table possible. We'd love to hear what you thought about our webinar today, so make sure to leave us some feedback on our post-webinar survey. For our live attendees today, stick around just a little longer for our post-webinar survey to redeem one SHRM and/or one HRCI credit. For any on-demand listeners, check your email for instructions on how to redeem your credit. We'll be sending out the webinar on demand in case you want to use this for reference or send it to a colleague. Also, stay tuned for more HR at the Table webinars and for blogs deep diving into today's topic. Next month, we'll be hosting the CEO and Head of Remote at HR Talent and Systems in Navigating Generational Shifts in the Workplace. We hope you can make it, and we will see you next time.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.